الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه الأخيار المنتجبين وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين. رب اقدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أتل ما أوحي إليك من الكتاب وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. Quran chapter 29 verse 45. Recite what has been revealed to you of the book and establish prayer. Indeed, prayer should deter one from indecency and wrongdoing, and the remembrance of God is an even greater deterrent. In a tradition, a narration attributed to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he said, "Man lam tanhahu salatuhu an al-fahsha'i wal-munkar, lam yazdad min Allahi illa bu'da." He whose prayer does not prevent him from indecency and wrongdoing will only grow further away from God. Salat, or prayer, is therefore supposed to be this automatic thing, automatic barrier, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, automatic barrier that deters us from wrongdoing and indecency. Wrongdoing and indecency, fahsha and munkar. Fahsha is what? Obscenity. Obscenity. The immorality in action, the immorality in the speech. This is fahsha. In a narration attributed to our fifth Imam, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, that he said, قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ أَحْسَنَ مَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يُقَالَ لَكُمْ. Say to people the best of what you would like to be said to you. For God hates or dislikes the one who curses, who insults, who slanders the believers. The obscene and vulgar. Allah dislikes the person who is obscene in the way they speak, in the way they act, immoral, and the persistent beggar. This is what fahsha is. Fahsha is mentioned abundantly in our traditions. Sometimes there are some actions that are those of the most despised of sins are described as fahsha, like adultery, for example. Or like engaging in acts of homosexuality, for example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about this, chapter 27, verse 54. وَلُوطًا إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَأْتُونَ الْفَاحِشَةَ وَأَنْتُمْ تُبْصِرُونَ. And remember Lot, when he rebuked his people, do you commit that shameful deed, that obscene deed, while you see? So this is fahsha, intense or acts of indecency. Munkar, another thing that the salah, the prayers, is supposed to deter us from, to prevent us from, to turn us away from. Munkar. Munkar is the thing that is rejected. In Arabic, munkar is the thing that is rejected as wrongdoing. But who decides whether to reject it or not? Is it the society? Is it the deen? Is it you as an individual? Is it your taste? What decides that this thing is inappropriate, or this thing is wrong, or this thing is, for example, rejected? Apparently, what we can understand is that an apparent reference to this measure is what we call al-fitrah, our initial disposition, our nature that Allah created us with, our pure nature. This fitrah, the initial disposition, rejects some things as wrong. Allah refers to this in Quran chapter 30, verse number 30. فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله. So be steadfast in faith in all uprightness, O Prophet, the natural way of God which He has instilled in people. There is no change in this creation of God. There are some things in us that don't change by the change of the circumstances, change of communities, societies, time and place. There are things that are natural within us as human beings. We reject. We can't accept dishonesty in our nature. We can't accept injustice. We reject it. No matter what age you live in, no matter what place and time you live in, no matter what your circumstances are, you reject this. You reject stealing, taking someone else's property. Your nature, your human nature cannot accept it. So, this is obviously not decided by the urf or the customary conventions in society. What is customarily known? The customs. Can we say that, well, this community has these customs and therefore they reject a few things and therefore these are wrong? Just because a community decided that it's customary to reject something or accept something. No. Custom is not an indicator of right or wrong. Many a times you might find something that would be the right thing to do. It's the actual right thing to do, but it's not customary to some communities. Some communities reject it. Like jihad. The other day we spoke about jihad. Many people misunderstand what jihad is. And so now in some Western communities, if you say jihad, they're repelled. They reject it. Although you see their values, in fact, they agree with it. But because of misinformation, because of misrepresentation, because of bias, some people form certain customs that direct to the wrong direction. Faith, iman, in some countries, you would find that if someone is a mu'min, decides to be a person of faith, a follower of any faith, they're looked down upon because faith now is not customary in these communities. So does custom or do customs then show what right and what wrong? So what communities reject, not just because it's customary to reject it, that doesn't mean it is wrong. Likewise, there are things that are wrong. They are wrong. Our nature rejects it. But some communities, they find it customary. They find it normal and fine. Relationships before marriage, for example. Some communities find it as well. That's normal. That's customary. So if you come and say, well, this is problematic actually, in terms of individuals, in terms of morality, in terms of society and family, they can't understand it. Although it is the right thing to do, but they don't understand it. Because there's been lots of misunderstanding, lots of misinformation. Sometimes you might have societies that degrade in their immorality, in their level of morality. They degrade and degrade and degrade to the extent that the right thing becomes wrong and the wrong thing becomes right. In the Quran, Allah talks about this. There's a verse, a beautiful verse, about the people of Lut. Very interesting verse. Look what Allah says in chapter 7, verse 82. وَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا أَخْرِجُوهُمْ مِنْ قَرْيَتِكُمْ إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. The people of Lut, but his people's only response was to say what? To the Prophet Lut. Expel them from your land. They are people who wish to remain pure. Purity and chastity in that community became what? Something that was abhorrent. Something that was rejected by the customs. So the customs don't tell you what is right and what is wrong. This is what I'm saying, the fitrah, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiple times, He reminds us of by the Quran, by the prophets, by the saints, by the successors of the prophets. How is all this then related to Salaat? How is this related to Salaat? Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. Salaat, or prayer, is the means that we have to connect with God. Alaykum as-salam. Is the tool that we have to gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the way that we connect and link ourselves to God. This is what Salat is. Salat is that opportunity where we gain attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, how is this supposed to deter us from indecency, immorality, and wrongdoing? Is it really by performing the acts that we do? The qiyam, standing up, bowing, prostrating, uttering some words that we probably don't understand what they mean or what we are saying. Is that really the salat that is supposed to take you to proximity to God? Is that the salat that is supposed to prohibit you from wrongdoing and indecency and immorality? Is that it? Or is it something else? Or is it really the attention of the heart? Is it really the presence of the heart? The answer is, obviously, it is the presence of the heart. It is your attention in salat, wa alaikum as-salam. It is your attention in prayers that activates this potential radiation that salat is able to instill in your heart. That attention, understanding of the meanings of what you say, understanding the meanings of the acts that you do, understanding the situation that you are in now. You're standing before whom? You're standing before the Lord of the worlds, the one who's the most capable, the one in whose hands is the control of every single thing in your life and in everyone else's life and in this world and in the existence. You're standing before that Lord, the merciful, the beautiful, the kind, the forgiving. It's your opportunity to lay down all your sins before God and turn to Him and ask Him, oh God, I'm here returning to you. Please accept me. To understand before whom you are standing. To understand what words are you saying. To understand that these dhikr or words of remembrance to God, what do they really mean? What am I saying when I'm standing and speaking to this mighty Lord? That helps your attention of the heart. That helps your presence in the heart. In a narration attributed to the Messenger of God, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he said, explaining khushu', explaining humility and attention in salat, he's saying, at-tawadu'u fi salat. It is humility in prayer. That the recognition about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you humble before Him, makes you recognize how insignificant you are before the Almighty Allah. At-tawadu', it's the humility. And that the servants, وَأَنْ يُقْبِلَ الْعَبْدُ بِقَلْبِهِ كُلِّهِ عَلَى رَبِّهِ, and that the servant turns his whole heart to his Lord. His whole heart. This is khushu' in salah. This is humility and attention in prayer that the Messenger of God is talking about. This attention requires this recognition. Not just the mental recognition that yes, God is there, He created the universe, He is the sustainer of everything, at the level of the intellect only. The attention, this recognition about God, it needs to be felt sentimentally in the heart. To the extent that maybe your heart would tremble when you realize the greatness of God, when you realize the power of God, when you realize the right of God upon you. This should instill in your heart this level of humility, level of feeling the shortcomings that you have before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That no matter what you do, like our Imams say, even if I spend, Imam Zainul Abidin says in one of these beautiful du'as, oh God, or Imam al-Hussein actually, even if I were to prostrate to you for ages, cry for you until my eyes are corrupted, worship you, stand before you until my legs are destroyed. No matter what I do, I can't thank you for one of the blessings that you have given me in my life. Understanding this level of shortcoming that you have before God, understanding the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that level of recognition needs to touch your heart. And so when you leave salat from that state and you go back to your life, you go back to your busyness, you actually engage all aspects of your life with this spirit. That peace that you felt with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it actually should display in all aspects of your life and relationships. Then when you meet these acts of indecency, the sins, the little mistakes or sins or disobediences of God here and there, you would feel your soul elevated. It is connected to something that is more lofty than all this, purer than all this. You wouldn't want to lose this beautiful taste that you tasted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would reject anything that takes you away from that taste. You would reject anything that takes you away from this Lord. You would realize that my Lord has been so kind to me, I can't betray Him by actually maybe paying attention for a split second to that sin, or looking for a split second into that haram, or hearing for a split second that haram. You feel you're betraying your beloved, you're betraying the one whom you love, the one who loves you, the one who cares about you, the one who blessed you, showered you with blessings all your life. You feel, I don't want that. I don't want to disobey God. I don't want to engage in these indecencies or acts of wickedness or wrongdoings here and there. And so the true salat, the true conscience in salat, the true recognition of God, the true attention of your heart and direction of your heart towards God, that's the true salat. That is supposed to practically deter you from the wrongdoing. automatically, naturally. This is what the attention to the words that we say, the acts that we do, the situation we're in, whom we're standing before, the attention to all of these during Salah. These are the feelings that they're supposed to instill in our hearts, to radiate our souls, to allow our souls to actually elevate, to actually gain the proximity to Allah, to the extent that you won't really care about anything anymore as long as God is pleased. Really, you wouldn't care if all the calamities befell your heart like mountains of calamities befell on the heart of Zainab salamullahi alayha. She would see everything as beautiful. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Aradita ya Rab, khudh hatta tarda. Oh God, are you pleased? Then take everything as long as you're pleased. I'm not attached to anything anymore as long as you are pleased. I don't want anything anymore as long as you are pleased. I don't want to feel sad or happy anymore as long as you are pleased, I am pleased. Isn't this the station that we want to reach in our lives? The state of what? Complete contentment with what Allah has decreed. Obviously, we do what we have to do. We do our obligations as God told us. We have responsibilities in this life. But we don't attach our hearts to things such that if we lose them, we feel sad. Or if we gain them, we feel we have to celebrate excessively. No, you live your life as an agent of Allah, accepting the will of God, accepting what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed of you. We ask Allah that He may help us, inshaAllah, elevate our souls with our prayers. Pay attention to Him, to the words we say, to the situation we're in during our prayers, such that, inshaAllah, our prayers would deter us absolutely from any sin, from any act of disobedience. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. أحسنتم. وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله والورع عن محارمه. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, the servants of God, I remind myself and I remind yourselves to remain conscious of God, to observe taqwa, to always be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the times, and to stay away from what Allah has prohibited. Back to the hadith of the Messenger of God that I started with, that he said, مَنْ لَمْ تَنْهَهُ صَلَاتُهُ عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ لَمْ يَزْدَدْ مِنَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بُعْدًا. The Prophet, the Messenger of God, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, said that if your prayers does not deter you, does not stop you from doing the indecency or the wrongdoings, then you are only increasing further in distance from God. You're getting further from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When your salat does not stop you from doing the wrong. So, obviously then we understand that the salah that does not prohibit you from doing the wrong thing is not the true salat. When you, God forbid, are someone, for example, who does not find it difficult or who finds it fine to commit sins, when you're doing salat 5 times a day, that salat that you're praying is not the true salat. It is not delivering the fruit that it's supposed to be delivering. So, obviously, only performing the fiqhi actions that we know, that's not sufficient. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't mean that this salat is not important. Sometimes you have some people who would say, well, look, I'm not focusing on salat anyway. I am not directing my attention and the heart towards Allah anyway. The salat is not helping me stop the sins that I'm doing anyway, so let me stop salat. That's wrong. That's wrong. Salat, prayers, doing the actions that we do, they are a requirement for achieving that fruit. It doesn't mean that the fruit, if it is not arriving, then you cut the tree altogether. No, you wait. You allow it. You try and try and try again and again and again. Not that you stop salat. You keep the salat. You keep the momentum. You keep the momentum. Because that salat is that thing that is required to make you jump up high. It's like the trampoline. It's like the trampoline. You want to jump high. You decide if you jump higher or not. It doesn't mean that if you're not able to jump higher today, then you remove the trampoline anyway. Because that would prevent you at all from flying spiritually to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something very important to remember. We also need to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only concerned with the salat that we do, the actions that we make, or the words that we say only. These are important. We should do it the right way. Salat should be done in the right way. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more concerned with the fruit that this instills in our hearts. Do you remember that beautiful verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about what? Offering sacrifices, animals, during Hajj. What does Allah say then? Chapter 22, verse 37. لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. That these offerings or sacrifices you're providing, neither their meat nor their blood reaches God. So it is not really the meat and the blood and all these mechanics that reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is what? Rather, it is your piety that reaches Him. The rituals that we do, the actions that we make, these are supposed to instill in our hearts taqwa, fear of God, consciousness of God, mindfulness of God. Not that we should do them just like any other customary ritual. No spirit, no meaning. The same thing applies to salat. Salat, when you perform it, you need to make sure that it actually elevates you spiritually. And so we should not suffice ourselves with educating ourselves and our children on or at the level of what? Just the actions of salat. That's important. We need to make sure we pray correctly. But we shouldn't be satisfied at that level. That look, we're doing salat correctly, that's it, move on. No. No. As important is also to focus on the quality of the salat that we're delivering. How are we performing this salat? Are we focusing or are we not? What tips are we learning on how to actually focus on salat? And that's what I'll share inshallah in the last minute or two that I have. A few tips. Number one, a few tips to allow you to focus more in salat. To allow you to turn your heart spiritually to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that the salat actually transforms your life. Actually transforms your quality of life even. Number one, learn the meanings and the words and the actions, or the meanings of the words and the actions that you do in salat. Learn them. Spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Learn what these really mean. At the superficial level. I'm not saying now at the depth of the spirituality. At the superficial level. Because these would help you with your recognition during salat. We covered it in some of the Thursday nights. They're recorded, half an hour recording. Go through it. See what salat really means. These actions, these words that you say. The Fatiha, the Tawheed, the Dhikr, the remembrances that you say. Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, the Adhan. Understand what these mean. That helps you. That helps you with your focus. If you don't understand what these mean, you will never be able to reach the level of focus as required. Except if Allah permits. Number two. So number one, learn the words. Understand what these mean. The actions, what these mean. Number two, pay attention to the environment where you're praying. At school, at home, at work. Where are you praying? Are you choosing, for example, in a house of, where there is 10 rooms. You're choosing the room where there are people gathered and talking and discussing and being noisy. Is that where you choose to pray? Or do you choose a room where there's less noise, less distractions? Yes? Are you praying, for example, in front of, or there's a mirror somewhere in front of you that might distract you? TV is on. Noises are on. Radio is on. Is that a good environment or is it a distracting environment? You need to make sure that you avoid these distractions. Some of these distractions, for example, are sometimes those who hold a mobile phone. When you have a mobile phone, sometimes, of course, it's necessary that people put it on silent, but sometimes it still vibrates. When you're in the middle of prayers, connecting with Allah, in the middle of that conversation with God, and something vibrates, isn't that a distraction? Right? Something to consider. If the ringtone rings, it's even worse. It's distracting all the believers maybe in the mosque. Right? So something is very important to pay attention to try to reduce the distractions, reduce the noise. Sometimes you might need the toilet, right? You have wudu, you already are in the state of ablution. But you say, no, I want to pray quickly and then go to the toilet while I'm in the state of ablution. I don't want to renew the wudu. Habibi, no, it's okay. Go to the toilet, renew the wudu. It's okay. More wudu is more light. Al-wudu nur. Wudu is light. وَالْوُضُوءُ عَلَى الْوُضُوء نُورٌ عَلَى نُور. Ablution again and again is light upon light. It's good to do wudu. Do wudu. And then pray in the state of serenity and peace rather than having to rush it. These are a few tips. I hope inshallah that I remember and yourselves also remember so that our salat can elevate us higher and higher to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. I say this and I ask God to forgive me and forgive yourselves. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد